The wind cut like a blade across Widow's Pass. Snow came down sideways, thick enough to erase the world beyond a few desperate feet. Jesse Dalton leaned low in the saddle, his shoulders hunched, breath burning in his chest as each gust clawed through his coat. Dust. Old, stubborn, loyal dust. Picked her way along the narrow trail with the kind of care that came from surviving too many winters to waste a step now. Behind him, bound close with a wool blanket and a strip of rawhide, his son clung to his back. Tommy's arms were locked tight around Jesse's waist, small fingers numb but unyielding. He hadn't said a word since they left Stillwater. No complaints, no tears, just the quiet, dangerous stillness of a child who knew better than to waste breath when the cold was hunting. Jesse felt the boy's forehead against his spine and silently counted each rise and fall of that small breath. As long as it was there, he could keep riding. Then dust stopped. Not a stumble, not a shy step, a full halt. Jesse tightened the reins. "Easy, girl," he murmured, voice nearly lost to the wind. Dust didn't move. Her ears flicked forward, then pinned back, a low, uneasy sound rolling in her throat. That's when Jesse saw the shape in the snow. At first, it looked like nothing more than a drift piled wrong against the rocks. But then the wind shifted, and a dark braid of hair slid free, stark against the white. A hand lay half buried, fingers blue, unmoving. Someone was lying in the pass. Jesse swung down from the saddle, boots sinking deep as he pushed through the drifts. He dropped to his knees beside the figure and brushed snow from her face. She was young, younger than he expected. Her skin was pale with cold, lips cracked, breath so faint he had to lean close to see it fog. Native, her clothing told him enough. Beadwork along the edge of her cloak, fine leather beneath the snow, craftsmanship too careful for a traveler and too proud for a servant. This wasn't some lost wanderer. This was someone important. Jesse's jaw tightened. Widow's Pass was no place to stop. Men froze here. Horses slipped and broke legs. Families vanished into white silence and were found again come spring, stiff and half-buried. And Jesse had a boy to get home. He glanced back at Tommy. The child had lifted his head, eyes wide, fear shining bright through exhaustion. "Pa!" Tommy whispered. Jesse didn't answer right away. He knew the math of survival better than most. 1 horse. 2 riders already. A storm that would only worsen before nightfall. If he lingered too long, the woman's chest shuddered. A breath. Shallow but real. Jesse swore under his breath. "Help her," Tommy said. It wasn't a question. Jesse closed his eyes for half a second, just long enough to curse the world, the storm, and the way fate always seemed to test men when they were already stretched thin. Then he shrugged out his coat and wrapped it around the woman's shoulders. They didn't ask names. There wasn't time. Jesse lifted her with a grunt, surprised by how light she was, and settled her across Dust's withers, securing her as best he could. He tightened Tommy's grip behind him, checked the knots twice with numb fingers, then swung back into the saddle. The pass howled in protest as they moved again. By the time Jesse reached his cabin, the sky had darkened to bruise purple and black. He carried the woman inside, laid her near the hearth, and fed the fire until warmth crept back into the room. Tommy fetched water, hands shaking, eyes never leaving the stranger's face. She never woke. Not that night, not the next day. Jesse did what he could, melted snow for water, rubbed her hands to keep the blood moving, spoke softly, though he didn't know why. On the 3rd morning, she was gone. The blanket lay folded. Jesse's coat hung by the door. No tracks in the snow, just the wind's endless erasing. Tommy searched the tree lean until his fingers went red. She didn't even say thank you. The boy muttered, not angry, just confused. Jesse stared at the empty hearth. "She doesn't owe us anything," he said. 2 weeks passed. Winter tightened its grip. Jesse returned to hauling freight, mending fences, doing the kind of work that kept a roof over a child's head but never left much else behind. He thought of the woman sometimes, usually when the wind screamed just right or when the fire burned low and the night felt longer than it should. Then the letter came. It arrived by way of a man on a fine horse, his coat clean, his boots polished, his eyes sharp with curiosity as they took in Jesse's rough cabin and the boy peering from behind his father's leg. You Jesse Dalton? The man asked. Jesse nodded. The envelope was heavy, cream-colored, sealed with red wax marked by a symbol Jesse didn't recognize. He didn't open it until the writer was gone. Inside, the words were careful, formal, heavy with consequence. It thanked him for an act of mercy performed in Widow's Pass. It named the woman he had saved, not as a wanderer, not as a victim of the storm, but as a sole heir to a vast native-held cattle empire stretching over 1,000 acres of disputed land. And it made an offer. Not gold, not cattle, marriage. Jesse sat down hard on the edge of the table, the paper trembling in his hand. Tommy climbed up beside him, eyes scanning the lines he couldn't yet read. What is it, Pa? Jesse swallowed. It's trouble, he said quietly. Outside, the wind shifted direction, carried with it the distant sound of hooves, and the unmistakable sense that the life Jesse thought he understood was already slipping away from him. The man came back 3 days later. This time, he didn't come alone. Jesse saw them crest the ridge just after dawn. 3 riders silhouetted against the pale winter sky, their horses tall, well-fed, and shod with iron that rang sharply against frozen ground. Dust lifted her head from the trough and snorted uneasy. Tommy noticed, too. Pa, he said softly. Jesse stepped onto the porch, rifle resting easy in the crook of his arm. Not raised, not lowered, just present. In the West, that alone was a language. The lead rider reigned in first. He was older than Jesse had expected, hair threaded with gray, posture straight as a fence post. His coat bore careful stitching, not flashy, but unmistakably expensive. Behind him rode a younger man with sharp eyes and a woman wrapped in a heavy shawl, her gaze calm, unreadable. The older man dismounted slowly. Jesse Dalton, he said, voice steady. My name is Samuel Whitaker. Jesse didn't offer his own. You already know who I am. Whitaker nodded. I do. The woman stepped forward then, pulling back her hood. Jesse felt the air leave his lungs. She looked stronger now. Color had returned to her cheeks. Her dark hair was braided neatly, bound with silver thread. Her eyes, dark, sharp, and steady, met us without hesitation. I remember you, she said. Her voice wasn't soft. It wasn't weak. It carried. You left before I woke, Jesse replied. She inclined her head slightly. The storm had already taken too much from you. Whitaker cleared his throat. This is my daughter, Ayanna. Jesse's grip tightened on the rifle. Daughter. The letter hadn't mentioned that. Whitaker gestured toward the valley below, where land rolled out wide and white beneath the winter sun. What you did on that pass saved more than one life, he said, and it created obligations I cannot ignore. I didn't do it for that, Jesse said. I know, Ayanna replied. That is why you were chosen. The word chosen settled heavy in Jesse's chest. They moved inside at Whitaker's request, crowding the small cabin with too much presence, too much weight. Tommy hovered close to Jesse, eyes flicking between the stranger's and his father's face. Whitaker spoke plainly. The land, over 1,000 acres, sat at the center of a brewing war. Settlers wanted it. Railmen wanted it. The territorial governor wanted it split and sold under false claims. Whitaker's cattle empire stood as the last barrier, protected only by treaties the law no longer cared to enforce. Ayanna is my only child, Whitaker said, and the law does not favor her. Jesse understood immediately. Marriage meant protection. A white man's name tied to native land complicated seizures. Delayed courts. Bought time. And what do I get? Jesse asked, hating himself a little for the question, but knowing better than pretend this was a negotiation. Whitaker didn't flinch. Security. A future for your son. A legacy that outlives us both. Tommy's fingers curled into Jesse's coat. Jesse looked down at him, then back at Ayanna. And you? Jesse asked her. She met his gaze without blinking. I get to keep my people alive. Silence pressed in. That night, Jesse lay awake long after the fire burned low. The offer gnawed at him, not because of greed, but because of Tommy, because of the way the world closed in on men without land, without power, without a name worth protecting. By morning, the decision felt less like a choice and more like a path already laid. They married before the snow melted. No church, no grand gathering. Just witnesses bound by necessity and a promise spoken quietly between two people who barely knew each other. Ayanna moved into Jesse's cabin at first. She learned the rhythm of the place quickly. When the floor creaked, how the stove liked to be coaxed, when dust needed her feed changed. She spoke little, but when she did, it mattered. Tommy watched her carefully. One night, as the wind rattled the windows, he asked her, "Are you staying?" Ayanna knelt in front of him, level with his eyes. "If you'll have me." Tommy thought about it, then nodded once. "Okay." Spring came slow, and with it, trouble. Men started riding the edges of the land. Survey stakes appeared where they didn't belong. One morning, Jesse found a fence cut clean through, cattle scattered, tracks leading toward town. Whitaker fell ill shortly after. By the time Jesse reached the main house, the old man lay pale and sweating, breath shallow, eyes fixed on his daughter. "Protect it," Whitaker rasped. "Protect them." Ayanna held his hand until it went still. The land passed to her that night, and with it, every enemy Whitaker had kept at bay. 2 days later, Jesse found a message carved into the barn door. "Leave, or bury your boy." Jesse stood there a long time, knife in his hand. The words burned into his mind. Inside the house, Tommy laughed at something Ayanna said, unaware that the world had just sharpened its teeth. Jesse knew then that marriage had bought him land, but it had also bought him a war. The first shot came at dawn. It wasn't meant to kill. That was the message. The bullet tore through the upper rail of the corral, exploding drywood inches from Jesse's head as he checked the horses. Dust reared, screaming, while the cattle surged in panic. Jesse hit the ground hard, rolling as a second shot cracked across the valley, close enough that he felt the air move. From the ridge line, riders peeled away into the trees. Jesse stayed down long after the sound faded, heart hammering, every sense sharpened to a razor's edge. This wasn't theft. This wasn't a warning. It was a test. By the time he got back to the house, Ayanna was already awake. She had heard the shots. She always heard everything. "They're getting closer," Jesse said. She nodded once. "They will not stop now." Tommy stood in the doorway, pale, clutching his coat. Jesse knelt in front of him, forcing calm into his voice. "Pack your things," he said. "Just the essentials." "Are we leaving?" Tommy asked. Jesse hesitated. Ayanna answered instead. "No," she said gently. "We are standing." The town turned on them faster than Jesse expected. At first it was quiet things. Storekeepers slow to serve him, men who once nodded now looking away. Then came the whispers, that he had sold himself, that he'd been bought with land and a woman, that his son was being raised under the wrong influence. The sheriff stopped Jesse outside the saloon one afternoon. "You're bringing trouble down on this place," the man said flatly. "Governor's office is watching that land. You'd be wise to step aside." Jesse leaned close. "You'd be wise to remember who freezes out here without a barn when winter comes back." The sheriff's jaw tightened. That night, Jesse found Tommy's bed empty. The house erupted into motion. Ayanna didn't scream. She didn't cry. She moved with terrifying precision, pulling on boots, grabbing a rifle, eyes burning with something ancient and unbreakable. "They took him," Jesse said, the words barely forming. "They want you to run," Ayanna replied, "or to break." Tracks led east, toward the river gorge where the land narrowed and the law never followed. Jesse rode like a man possessed. They found Tommy at dusk, tied but unharmed, sitting beside a fire with 3 men who didn't bother to hide their faces. One of them smiled when Jesse stepped into the clearing. "Nice land you've got," the man said. "Shame if something happened to it." Ayanna stepped forward before Jesse could speak. "You will leave," she said. "Tonight." The man laughed. "Or what?" She raised her rifle. The shot echoed across the gorge, clean and final. The man fell without a sound. The others bolted. Tommy ran to Jesse, sobbing, arms locked tight. Jesse held him like he might disappear again if he loosened his grip. By morning, the valley knew. Blood had been spilled. There would be no more warnings. As smoke rose from distant camps and riders gathered on the ridges, Jesse understood the truth at last. Saving a woman in the snow had given him land, but protecting his family would cost him everything else. And the final reckoning was coming. The valley burned before sunrise. Smoke curled up from the southern flats, black against the pale morning sky. Jesse stood on the porch with his rifle resting against the post, watching riders move like shadows along the distant ridges. Not hiding anymore, not warning, gathering. Inside the house, Tommy slept fitfully on a pallet near the fire. Ayanna sat beside him, braiding her hair with steady hands, her face calm in a way that frightened Jesse more than fear ever could. "They will come today," she said. Jesse nodded. "I know." She finished the braid and stood. "Then we do this our way." By noon they were surrounded. Men poured into the valley from 3 directions. Settlers, hired guns, men with nothing to lose and everything promised. They rode hard, confident in numbers, certain that fear would finish what threats had not. Jesse sent Tommy down into the root cellar beneath the house, pressed his forehead to the boys, and whispered words he prayed he wouldn't regret. "No matter what you hear, you stay hidden," he said. "You survive. That's your job." Tommy nodded, tears streaking his face. "Don't leave me." "I won't," Jesse said. "Not ever." The first gunfire shattered the quiet moments later. Jesse and Ayanna fought like the land itself, unyielding, relentless, bound to every inch they defended. From windows and fence lines, from the bar and the high ground, they held back wave after wave. Dust screamed in the corral, cattle stampeded, and the air filled with smoke and screams. But numbers always win. A bullet tore through Jesse's shoulder, spinning him into the dirt. He tasted blood, forced himself up, fired again. Ayanna dragged him behind the stone wall near the house, her face streaked with soot, eyes blazing. "They're pushing north," she said. "If they reach the house." A scream cut her off. Not a gunshot, a child scream. Jesse's heart stopped. "Tommy." The cellar door burst open as smoke crept low along the ground. A stray fire had caught the outer wall, flames licking fast in the dry timber. Jesse tried to rise and failed. Ayanna didn't hesitate. She ran. Jesse watched her disappear into the smoke, every instinct screaming after her. Gunfire roared. Flames leapt higher. Then, through the chaos, he saw her emerge, Tommy in her arms, coughing, alive. A rider broke from the crowd, rifle raised. Jesse fired once. The man fell. The remaining attackers faltered. Something shifted then, not fear, but realization. This land was not empty. This family was not weak. And blood had already been paid. As dusk settled, the riders withdrew, some wounded, some broken, none victorious. Silence crept back into the valley, thick and trembling. Jesse lay on the ground as Ayanna knelt beside him, pressing cloth to his wound. Tommy clung to her side, shaking, eyes wide with exhaustion and awe. "You stayed," Tommy whispered to her. She pulled him close. "I told you I would." Weeks later, snow returned lightly, gentle this time. The land remained theirs, not because the law suddenly cared, but because word had spread. Some battles were too costly to fight, some families too dangerous to threaten. Jesse healed slowly. Ayanna rebuilt what was burned. Tommy learned the land, the cattle, the weight of legacy. One evening, as the fire crackled low, Jesse watched Ayanna laugh softly at something Tommy said. The sound surprised him. "You didn't have to stay," Jesse said quietly. She met his gaze. "Neither did you." Outside, the wind passed harmlessly over the valley. Widow's Pass no longer claimed lives. It guarded them.